point out was that resource efficiency is not the same thing as sustainability, and that in fact there are three elements of sustainability. There's a societal element, an economic financial element, as well as a sort of resource environmental element to it. We started out in the conversation talking about the fact that we need to understand the outcomes of what we do. Very often we say we're doing things to improve sustainability, and we truly believe that, but is it based in fact, or are we just believing it? So we need to understand the outcomes, understand what the real impact is of any solution that we propose, understand how we measure what. So what do we need to measure, how do we need to measure it? And through generating that kind of information, then affect a culture change, both within our industry, because although many of us in the room may be sort of keen greens, etc., there is still a large majority of people in the industry who have other things to worry about as their day job. But also without our industry. Now, our stakeholders are everybody who owns or occupies a building, so everybody, basically. And if we want things to change in how buildings are more resource efficient, more sustainable, we need to make a convincing argument to everybody else as to why that's important. It's one of the most important things that we said today. However, there was a lot of other important stuff underpinning that. The need for flexible solutions and approaches. One size does not fit all. And that applies across the whole gamut of buildings. But one of the things that was highlighted was pre-1919 buildings, heritage buildings. We need to be very careful how we treat them, because we can very easily do them damage. But also we need to think about to what extent do they need to be treated, and to what extent can we learn from heritage buildings. Now, a lot of heritage buildings, was pointed out to me, have been used as farm buildings, as homes, as offices, as warehouses, as factories. They've gone back to being offices or homes again. They are actually very sustainable at one level as buildings. They use a lot of natural daylight because they have higher ceilings. They're very adaptable. What can we learn from that, and what can we bring back into our building design and operation from that? And being aware that buildings have they're not just structures that consume energy, they also have an amenity value. And if people find a building unattractive or uncomfortable, they won't engage with it in the way that we expect them to. They might not engage with it at all, it may stand empty. So there's a tension there between trying to be resource efficient and providing a building that is actually fit for purpose. Very importantly, the stakeholders pay. So we have to convince that we have to understand what they want and provide it to them in a resource efficient way. Part of the challenge for us all of that is an increasing complexity in terms of managing buildings and so forth, and a growing skills gap between the design intent and the understanding of how to manage and run buildings and how to construct them appropriately and so forth. We had quite an interesting conversation around, what does that then mean? How do we maintain a relevant level of skill? If we go further and further towards automation, fit and forget, modern methods of manufacture and so forth, do we risk losing a skill base that we then regret the loss of when things go wrong and we don't understand how to write them? Almost there. A few other things that we mentioned. Choice editing is a real opportunity. It's also a risk. So, for example, the example I was using, which all of you have heard me say now, is low flush toilets, a real success from a choice editing resource efficiency point of view, versus power showers. People love them, but they're a disaster from a resource efficiency point of view. So how do we encourage product manufacturers, equipment manufacturers and so forth to create sustainable solutions, resource efficient solutions? Do we need mandatory requirements? What kinds of drivers work? And do we need something like a repository of specifications for people when they're procuring, for example? One of the other big things we talked about was the sources of resources. You may have a spoil heap in one place that would be very useful as fill in another place, but at the moment regulation is a barrier to doing that. Visibility of what's available is a barrier to doing that. Assessment of risk is a challenge for that. So we need to look at that kind of an issue, where we get our resources from, and how we do that more effectively. And regulation currently is a barrier. It could become a real opportunity. It could become something that drives stakeholders to do the right thing in those points. And there are a couple of other minor points that we covered at the end, which actually could be major points. Things like new build versus retrofit. What's the carbon balance in that? Is it more effective to knock down an entire street of buildings and build a whole load more one-storey higher density? Or is that actually a carbon disaster? Do we know? Things like embodied water are beginning to emerge on the agenda. What do we understand about embodied water? How important is that going to be? We live in a water-constrained country. And how does embodied water link with embodied carbon as well? There's a feedback loop there. So those are some of the things that came out towards the end that not everybody would have heard. But very very importantly, it's all about integrating the people, the process and the technology. We mustn't forget the people. Is that?
Thank you. 10 seconds over.